After 18 months of deliberation, we now know the whip steering group's recommendations. And it has been confirmed that disqualification will now be the ultimate penalty for the worst rule breaches. This could have massive implications in big betting races such as the Grand National, where a winner or placed horse could end up being thrown out and punters who back such a horse would lose their money. The key recommendations are: the whip stays. The stroke limits, 7 on the flat, 8 over jumps, stay. But certain penalties will change to combat a win-at-all-cost mentality, particularly in big races. Before we look at the recommendations, how do we arrive at a consultation? The last major shake-up of the whip rules happened in 2011, and there's been a significant decrease in whip offences since. There has, however, been a continued discussion within racing about how the whip is perceived by the public and whether the rules are fit for purpose if they're regularly broken when big prizes are at stake. Even some ex-jockeys, such as our own Luke Harvey, have said action was inevitable so long as cheats were being seen to prosper.
I'm in favour of horses being disqualified. It's in no other sport can you cheat and win. It doesn't. What's the point in obeying to the rules? When the chap that's beaten you gets away with it.
It was in 2020 that the Horse Welfare Board unveiled its A Life Well Lived strategy. A consultation on the use of the whip was one of 20 recommendations they made at that time. A 20-person strong, independent whip consultation steering group was then recruited from a wide range of racing and non-racing organisations. 18 months later, their conclusions have been published. Perhaps the most controversial conclusion, and the one that was leaked in advance, is the concept of disqualification. The group has recommended that disqualification should occur in the most egregious cases where a minimum of at least 4 strokes over the limit has taken place. The group acknowledged that such a penalty would have seen the winners of recent big races, including this year's Grand National, disqualified. They also argue, however, that the deterrent power of such a penalty would mean that such breaches simply would not have happened in the first place. Other recommendations include that the whip for encouragement and the current stroke limits should stay. Under the new rules, though, the whip can only be used in the backhand position. Put simply, that means with the stick pointing down from the jockey's hand towards the ground rather than up in the air. Jockey Tom Scudamore acknowledges that the restriction to backhand will prove a challenge for some riders. The group concluded, though, that the backhand technique is more compact and less likely to produce excessive force. The existing whip penalties for minor breaches will continue, but there's to be a doubling of the standard penalties for breaches if they occur in major races. Such races are defined as Class 1 or 2 in both codes, or where prize money exceeds specific levels. It's worth remembering that continued debate around the whip is what led to this whole process. Given that race riding and interference is now the subject of continued debate, some people, including Freddie Tulitsky, top rider who was left paralysed by a fall caused by interference at Kempton, wonder whether race riding and interference shouldn't be a priority too.
I don't quite understand how the whip can be more important right now than the riding offences, interferences of what has been happening in the last few months.
So, what happens now? The recommendations themselves are not up for debate, but there will be a period of technical discussions where relevant groups, particularly jockeys, will have a chance to learn more about and adapt to the demands of the new recommendations. Full implementation is expected in the late autumn of this year. Will disqualification prove to be the ultimate deterrent, or will its application in a high-profile race cause chaos? And if disqualification is the only deterrent for an offence that doesn't endanger anyone, should it also be considered in order to protect riders from rough riding and interference? Only time will tell.